Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 12 of Party in the Back, the review series for the wagons and estate cars of GranTurismo's current lineup. And in this episode we're featuring probably one of the strangest cars I've ever reviewed on this channel. It's a car which could almost end up in the random reviews series, but the only reason why it isn't is because it is technically an estate car, as well as a pickup truck, a coupe, and a Targa. It's a pretty weird car, to say the least, and it's one of the only cars in the game, if not the only car, which you could technically say is kind of a transformer, because you can take the whole rear section of the car off and fit it with a completely different rear end to turn it into a much more sporty looking, say, Nissan 180SX style coupe, or you can take the centre section of the roof off and turn it into, as I said, a Targa top, like an NSX. Or you can put the current back end on the car, which you don't have the option of, it's just stuck with that on the game, to turn it into almost a shooting brake, a two-door estate car. It's a very odd car. Add on top of that, it's one of the only estate cars that I'm aware of to have pop-up headlights. It is, interestingly, the only estate car on GranTurismo to be front-wheel drive, which makes it completely unique, as if it wasn't already unique enough. And it's also, by a significant margin, the cheapest, with the Volvo being its only real rival in that regard, but the Volvo's almost in a class of its own as well. Now, in terms of overall sheer spec, this is pretty much the least impressive wagon in the game overall. I'm not going to lie about that. You can't lie about that. It's an obvious thing. It's powered by a 1.6 litre turbo engine, which puts out fully tuned 290 horsepower. Now, if you think about it, that's actually not that bad. It also puts out 217 pound-feet of torque at a perhaps surprisingly high 7,000 RPM, and at 7,400 RPM for peak power, so it's a pretty rev-happy engine, not surprisingly for a turbocharged 1.6. One of the most impressive things about the car, though, is actually the weight. You probably wouldn't expect it to weigh all that much, but even then, this is a lot lighter than you'd probably guess it could be. With the full weight loss package, this weighs 894 kilos. That's seriously impressive. It makes it by far the lightest weight wagon in the game. So although on the surface it's a very strange car with not much going for it, it actually has quite a few interesting, unique quirks to its name. It's the only front-wheel drive estate, it's the cheapest estate, and it's the lightest estate. There are not many other wagons in the game which hold that many unique things to their name. But of course, the real question is it actually any good? Because there are plenty of cars that are lightweight, that doesn't necessarily make them any good. Well, the fact that it actually does have 290 horsepower means that the performance actually isn't that bad. It sits at a PP of 478, and you definitely wouldn't want it to be any higher than that. It is actually reasonably competitive though as a lower level PP racer. Front-wheel drive cars tend to be pretty quick for their power, and this is no exception for that. I'd recommend using it at, say, 400 to 450 pp. It's pretty good for that level, and focus predominantly on keeping the weight low, because the performance is pretty good anyway for its power, so you don't really need to worry about that in the lower PPs. One other impressive thing about this car is also the horsepower per tonne, which you could say isn't surprising considering how light it is, but still, it doesn't have a massive amount of power to endow it with a great horsepower per tonne, but surprisingly it puts out 324. And to put that into perspective, that's more than the Volvo 240, despite having significantly less power, and that's not quite, but almost as much horsepower per tonne as both the 3-litre Subaru Legacy wagon and the Lexus IS300 Sport Cross. That's pretty impressive for such a weird little car. Now, as I said, it is the cheapest wagon in the game at a pretty silly 14,810 credits, so it is dirt cheap. And usually for that kind of price you'd get some tiny, tinny little K car, but this is a decent, full-sized, weird but full-sized car. Now in terms of actual performance, the top speed is a lot better than you might expect. It's, if I remember correctly, around the 170-180 region under its own power. So not bad at all for such a weird and what you'd expect to be useless car. The acceleration isn't exactly face-meltingly quick, but it gets the job done in the lower PPs, and overall this is one of those cars which I'm not going to tell you it will beat all comers or that it's an amazing sleeper car, of course not, but it's a very quirky, extremely unique and very interesting alternative to not only some of the lower wagons in the game, but also some of the other low PP racers in general, especially some of the quirky 80s saloons and hatchbacks. So, if you haven't tried the Nissan EXA Canopy, you may want to consider giving it a place in your garage if you've not bought anything else in a while and fancy trying something new. But that's it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.